Welcome to the Writer Reads Chronicles of a Dark God, Book 2, Dark Gods Rise, Chapter 23, Soldiers for the Old One. While Shira raged as the battle in the ruins unfolded in the blood-filled trench at the foot of the altar, he watched through the king's eyes and roared in frustration as the villagers were freed from their cages, and then he calmed. Using the king's mouth, he gave a curt order and directed the earthweird observing the battle to see how Jarul and his men had fared in their escape. The creature dove deep into the ground, and after a moment of all-encompassing darkness, the picture in the trench cleared to show a torchlit room, in which Jarul and his offsider Anthra, was it, stood in between two overturned beds. To the left, the portal gleamed a brilliant silver, and to the right, at the far end of the wall opposite it, stood an open door. But Jarul only had eyes for the disused fireplace on the other side of the room from the weird's vantage point. The weird withdrew until a light haze covered the picture, and the king realized the creature had withdrawn into the wall in an effort to remain unseen. The raid leader became a sparsely featured blur, recognizable by his crown of silver hair as he stopped just beyond the hearth and spoke a soft welter of words. The king recognized the magic in them and wondered why Jarul had chosen now to cast a spell when he could have cast one much earlier. He watched as the raider moved closer to the fireplace, still casting as he knelt to peer up into the chimney's depths. His answer came when Jarul abruptly ducked his head against a soft powdering of soot before withdrawing to irritably shake the stuff from his head and shoulders. So someone hides, he murmured, and he calls them out. I wonder who he hunts. He watched as the raider shifted impatiently before the fireplace, smiling at the satisfaction in the man's voice when he said, She comes. I wonder who. He cursed as the first of the raiders skidded into the room and the weird hesitated, torn between following the king's command to watch Jarul and the king's unspoken desire to see who it was that hid inside the chimney. Well, Shira made the decision for both of them, his will keeping them in place and focused on the bandit leader as he ordered his people through the portal. The ones who followed Anthra, before Jarul pivoted and stalked into the silver, were the lucky ones. It was as the raid leader disappeared that the king felt the old one's presence beginning to fade. He also felt the god rally, reaching for him with a growing hunger, and hastily ordered the weird back to the temple. The creature balked against the order, resentment snapping back along their connection, but it obeyed, and the picture in the trench was again engulfed in the black of the earth's inner darkness. Turning away from the altar, the king ended the spell, and the trench became a slowly congealing pool of blood once more. The king did not notice the transformation. He was distracted by the slow but sure descent of his god's presence all around him. I've sent for more, he gasped as Walshira's cloud-like form dimmed his view of the temple. They will not arrive in time, the old god growled in reply. And what good will my soul do you when my kingdom falls from your control and your conquest against the younger gods ends in defeat? The king protested. I will raise another puppet, the god answered, one from among the bastards you have fathered. Hunger threaded his tones, making his voice thick with desire, and fear thrilled along the king's spine. He felt Washira snatch the emotion away, devouring it with greedy pleasure, and another wave of fear rolled through him. Again, the Old One devoured it. As the king struggled to find the words to stay the Old One's hand, a bell tolled, its deep notes disturbing the god's concentration and making the king look to the temple doors with renewed hope. My lord, he gasped, his voice harsh with pain and fear, your sacrifice has come. You can replenish your power and spare yourself the trouble of finding and training another high priest. He waited, his heart in his throat for the god's reply, and barely stifled a sob when Washira spoke. So be it, the Old One agreed, loosening his hold on the king. Slay the first 10 as soon as they arrive. The rest I'll dine on at my leisure. As you wish, my lord, the king agreed, breathing a sigh of relief as the old god's presence lifted and the air lightened around them. As he turned to direct the new arrivals, the king realized that most of his soldiers, didn't know the God he served. His memory was restored by the sudden silence and complete cessation of movement as the men entered the temple proper. They were accompanied by the temple servants who prodded them toward the center of the room. One of his captains caught sight of him in his ceremonial armor and stepped toward him. "Your Highness?" he asked, uncertainty coloring his voice. "Welcome and well done, Camerai," the king answered. "Bring the traitors forward and serve the God who brings you victory in the battlefields of the world." The captain hesitated, then swallowed hard and gestured for the soldiers to bring their prisoners forward. The king waited until the first rank of soldiers had forced their captives to stand before him. "My lord," the king said, speaking to Walshira and indicating the prisoners with an open-handed wave. "My pleasure," Walshira replied. The doors closed with a sudden clang, and a strong breeze swept through the men, and the old god's presence descended among them. It was the first time the king had witnessed his god in a frenzy, but now, as the god's presence obscured servant, soldier, and prisoner alike, he became painfully aware of the nearness of his escape. Overwhelmed by terrified gratitude, he dropped to his knees and let the sounds of the god's feeding wash over him. While Shira found him there when he lifted, sated from the carnage he left. He hadn't spared a single soul, or wasted one drop of life, or the tiniest ounce of emotion. Power surged through him, revitalizing a life force that had been left parched and frail from his battle with the gods, and whatever power had come and snatched Sophriel's soul from him. His form billowed and swirled as he focused his attention on the king. "Thank you, my king," he said, satisfied with the way his voice made the man jump. "You have fed me well, and now, it seems, you have learnt to respect my power." King Andreas Feravan raised his head, flinching when he saw how close the swirling cloud of darkness had approached. It hovered a bare hand's breadth from his face, and he stifled a gasp in case he inhaled some of its wispy edges by mistake. Well, Shira chuckled, and when Andreas said nothing, he spoke. "I am revitalized," the old god told him, "and you need servants of more faith. Not one of those who brought the sacrifices was willing to serve you after seeing the glory of my temple. Now they will serve me for eternity." "How do you mean, my lord?" Andreas stammered. The cloud coalesced into shadow and twisted away. "Come," Walshira ordered. "I will take others of flagging faith and transform them into servants of power, bonded to you by my might, and eager to see your every command is met." "My lord?" Andreas stammered, but Walshira continued, the darkness moving from shadow to the inky black outline of a man. "Come," he commanded, coming to a halt before the altar. The king followed, not sure what to expect, and not entirely trusting this new form his god had taken. "Watch," Walshira commanded, motioning the king to look toward the blood-filled trench. "Watch and see what gifts I have for you." The darkening liquid in the trench took on a glassy sheen, then cleared to show Captain Reuven Suran. The captain was leading the attack on Staravan's temple in Wildergen. The blood-framed window showed him directing his men through the temple's inner sanctum. As he watched, Andreas saw Walshira reach one dark-fingered hand through the window and touch the captain's shoulder. He looked from the captain to Walshira, and the old one's smoky features twisted into a smile. "Watch the pool," he ordered.